Hey, my name is Samar. I also go by Sam or First Time Panner. Any of those you want to call me, you can. Hopefully you noticed the setup change. My background is the same for now, but I did finally get a phone stand and ring light. So for the past, I think it's been over maybe like 2.5 years now that I've had this channel, and I've gone through like 3 or 4 different setups for filming because I just didn't want to shell out the money for a proper stand and light and a proper filming setup. But finally I just bit the bullet after my last resort filming setup finally broke down on me last week. And it turns out finding a halfway decent setup wasn't too expensive, so luckily there's that because I am trying to budget. But this is the first time that I'm ever trying this setup, so if it looks weird to you, let me know in the comments, or if you have any suggestions. I literally just have my phone stand, I propped it up to a certain height randomly, and then I set my lighting on yellow light, which is my favorite light, but I just set it to a random brightness. So I'm probably gonna play around with things for future videos, but if you have any recommendations or tips or anything you'd prefer to see, please let me know and I'll try to do that to the best of my ability. But anyway, this will be an update for my No Pan Left Behind project. I'm sure there are plenty of people who have done No Pan Left Behind on YouTube, so you probably know what it's about. You just try to use every pan in a palette at least once, so you use everything in the palette. I structured this project so that I would use every single pan of eyeshadow and every single eyeshadow palette that I own throughout the year of 2024. So I didn't randomize anything, I'm just hand selecting palettes. So I pick 4 or 5 palettes each month that I want to use No Pan Left Behind style, and happily I have been successful in that goal every month so far. At the beginning of the year, I didn't think that I was actually going to be able to do that because I only gave myself the calendar month. I wasn't gonna allow myself rollovers, and I really thought it would be more difficult than it has been, or I wouldn't hit my goal as much because I'm also doing Project Level Up and I have eyeshadow non-palette eyeshadows in other projects. But yeah, I've been really crushing this project. I'm so excited about it, and I'll stop rambling now and just get into the update. But yeah, I'm really enjoying myself and I'm so excited to keep going for the rest of the year. So for the September roundup, I had 5 palettes. I had my NYX Ultimate Edit Warm Neutrals. This is a 6-pan palette. My Dose of Colors Cutting Edge. I never list them in order like this. I don't know why I'm doing it now. But I have my ColourPop Avatar The Last Airbender, and then my Urban Decay Naked Heat and Naked Honey palettes. I brought these two palettes with me while I was on a 2-week trip out of town, along with a Project Level Up palette. So yeah, I was not forced because I did this project on purpose, but I was limited to these 2 palettes plus the 4 pans and the other palette that I had with me, and of course I was able to knock these out very quickly. I think it only took me 3 uses per eyeshadow palette to use every shade in these. I'll open these up so you can actually see them. I usually try to do my eyeshadows one at a time because it makes editing these videos a lot easier. But yeah, I just went back and forth between these 2 palettes depending on what I wanted to wear that day, and I really enjoyed using them. This is what these 2 palettes look like. I'm sure you've seen them before. They're not new at all. In fact, I think the Naked Honey is discontinued. I haven't seen it anywhere on any website, but I really enjoyed using both of these. And I actually discovered something which has been happening throughout the entire year. The more I use these eyeshadow palettes, the more and more I learn about them as palettes individually. But going into this month, I really thought I was going to enjoy the Naked Honey better, but I actually enjoyed using the Naked Heat. I don't want to say a lot more because I didn't dislike using this at all. I still enjoyed it, but I made some looks that I really loved with this palette, and I did feel slightly limited in this palette. I would say my favorite, by far, my favorite shadow in this palette is the shade Queen. Here, I'll swatch it. This is what Queen looks like. Oh, now that I have new lighting, I have to figure out how to show swatches, but this is Queen. It's like a mid-tone gold with a tinge, like an undertone tinge of green, and it's so beautiful. I love wearing the shade. It's like a perfect, for me, a perfect everyday like eyeshadow metallic, and it's like subtle too. It's not one of those super like flashy indie shadows, which I do love a good, you know, sparkly ethereal shadow, but just for every day I really like this, especially because going out of town with family, I do like to wear more subdued makeup, because literally no one else in my family or a group of friends is into makeup the way I am, so I just feel a little more comfortable with something more subdued. But I did feel slightly limited because this first shade, the first shade in this palette and the Naked Heat are both like, which I had to discover the hard way. I tried on the first day of using this palette, sorry my pipes are going, I tried using this to set my lid and I was like, why is my entire eye sparkly? This is actually like a satin. Okay, now I have a jet flying by, sorry about the noise. But so like this shade, I used it just because I had to for the project, but I really didn't like the way this looked. I'll swatch it on my other hand. If you can see, it's like catching the light because it is kind of more like a pearlescent sheen. And then for my skin tone, there's only one deep shade in this palette, which is this last one, Sting. But even this one for me is like a mid-toned, like more of a transition shade. So I felt like every time I mean I had the other palette with me that did have a deep brown in it, so that's what I would use instead. But if I only had this palette, I would have to use this shade in every single look that I did. Unless I was just trying to do a quick one and done look, I would have to use this one shade every single time I did an eyeshadow look with it, which just felt a little limiting. Also for my skin tone, like this is just my personal experience with this palette, I'm not saying it's bad, but for my skin tone there is no need to have, I mean this one either, but there's no need to have both of these shades. I feel like they're kind of nearly the same depth. One is just like neutral and then one is a warm tone, but I would use them pretty much in the same way to like set my lid or like set my eyeshadow primer. I also didn't really, just for my experience, appreciate that there were two kind of yellow golds in here. So this one, which is the shade Honey, that's just a straight up yellow, and I usually do, like, I don't mind having yellow metallics and shimmers in my palettes because I'll just like put them on top of a colorful shade, and I usually really like how that turns out. But there are no like colorful shades in this palette, so this just ends up being a yellow metallic for me that I would have to use as a standalone. I think I did try to like mix it with Honey, or not Honey, Queen, but because it's not like a super green shade, it kind of didn't really work out how I wanted it to. And then you have another like yellow gold shade called Golden, so I feel like, I don't know, this palette just didn't have as much contrast as I really wanted it to. When I first bought this palette, this was one of the first eyeshadow palettes I ever bought for myself. I really enjoyed it. At the time, like, those feelings were really valid because I really was only into warm tones, and this kind of was just like right up my alley, and I was just kind of having fun trying different things. But now that I know exactly what I want from a palette, even though I'm definitely not going to get rid of this because I still love a lot of the shades in here, and it still has a special place in my heart for being one of the first palettes that I ever bought, because I just like wanted it for so long. I wanted it for maybe like 4 or 5 months before buying it, but yeah, it just doesn't have the same feeling to it as it did before. And I had so much fun using this Naked Heat palette. Of course, like again, we have that kind of pearlescent shade that I really just don't care about, but I did use it as like an inner corner highlight. I just loved using this so much for all 3 looks that I did with this, especially the shade Ember here, this deep metallic, which is like, it's pretty much the same depth as this last matte, which is called Ashes, but it does have like a very slightly pinky purple tone to it, so I did use it one day as like my outer corner. It is so pretty. If you can see like that slight pink purple tone to it, it is so beautiful. And then also my favorite shade in this palette, which I discovered when I used it, which I think was like the last look that I did with this palette, it's this shade Scorched. I just used it as an all over lid color. It is so beautiful. It's like a brown bronzy toned pink. It is so pretty, and it works so well with pretty much like, you could pair pretty much every shade in here with like every other shade in this palette and it would look good. So I think this is really good for someone who's like a beginner to makeup and likes these tones, but I really just enjoyed using this, and every single look I did came out so beautifully in my opinion, so I really enjoyed using it. Then I also had the Avatar The Last Airbender palette from ColourPop. This I've learned to appreciate more than what I thought of it when I put it into this project, because I did kind of feel like this was just a palette that I was keeping for the packaging and the memories, but I actually did enjoy the looks that I created with this palette. I had like, I think I was wearing this shirt when I did a look with this bottom row. I did like all 4 rows of looks. I think for a few of them I may have added 1 or 2 shades from other palettes, but for each of the 4 looks I like exclusively used these 3 shades from this row. Like I didn't mix rows is what I'm trying to say. I did the Air look. I really enjoyed it for like a super subtle, just like everyday look. I wore it when I was hanging out with my friends who like do not care about makeup at all, so I didn't want to like this is weird, I didn't want to like waste a really like intricate look if like no one was gonna see it because I wasn't filming. This is the metallic from that row, and that day I used it as an inner corner, but I realized that you can actually use this all over your lid, like on your eyes. It shows up much deeper than it looks like in the pan or even swatched, so that's good to know for like the next time I use this palette. Then of course I love my look with the Earth row. Like I don't even need to talk about that one because it was like the one that I knew I was gonna like the most because those are my tones. I think the water look that I did was literally just only these 3 shades, like I didn't add anything, and that was all right. It was better than I remembered it being, but it still wasn't great. It was just, I just don't like these blue tones on my skin tone. It's just a personal thing, but the shadows performed pretty well, so there was that at least. And then the standout definitely was this red fire row. I created what I like now think is such a beautiful fiery red orange look. I don't think I added anything to this look either. I think I only used these 3 shades, and I paired it with like a red lipstick that I put like an orange lip crayon on top of it. And then in the pictures I didn't have a gloss on top, and I think the day I filmed with this I also didn't have the gloss, but later that day I put a gloss on top and it just made the lip like glossy and bright and shiny, and it kind of just pulled the entire look together, and I think that's what was missing from the look. And then I was wearing like a red cheek with an orange powder blush on top. The look just came together so beautifully, and it really made me appreciate these red tones. Granted, red is still definitely my least favorite color on me to wear, especially for eyeshadow, but I learned how to use this palette in a way that I really like. I ended up using my Warm Neutrals palette from NYX in combination with my Level 4 palette from my Project Level Up, so my Cream and Sugar Elf Quad. So I do really like this as a companion palette, but I did want to note that in my last video I did say that like I was considering decluttering this if I found the formula wasn't that great, because I was like, well, I have the Naked Heat and I have my Sigma Ambiance, but the formula on this is still so good. Like, I remember the first time I tried this, that was the one standout thought that I had about this palette. I was like, the shades are just fine, but I really love the formula. It's like a super thin, lightweight powder, and it blends out so easily, and it's not patchy, it's not chalky, but it doesn't take a lot to build it up. It's just very well formulated. I think lots of drugstore brands could take notes from this formula from NYX because it's really good. So for that reason, I'll be keeping it because there's nothing wrong with it. And the final palette is my Dose of Colors Cutting Edge palette, which was the first time I've ever used this palette. If you haven't seen my Get Ready With Me, which should be my last video, I'll link it in the description box and at the end of the video. But I use this palette to recreate a look from Steph, like from It's Just Steph, a look that she did. I'm not gonna spoil how it turned out, but I did really enjoy using this palette. I love the tones in here. The quality is just as every single other 5-pan from Dose of Colors that I've ever tried, and of course I love the tones in here, so I was really happy with that. And I'll let you watch the video to hear like more of my in-depth thoughts. I do have to be somewhere soon, but let me introduce my October roundup. I am filming this a few days early, so I won't start using these palettes until October. It's just kind of like a rule that I have for myself that I have to use these within the calendar month. I'm a little bit neurotic, but the first palette that I'll talk about is my Kaja stack, or Kaja Bento. I keep calling them stacks, but this is in Spiked Ginger, which was, I think, recently discontinued, but it's definitely not being sold, at least on the Sephora site. I've also never used this palette before. I bought this even before I bought my Forest Night palette, and I used my Forest Night palette a while ago, so I really need to use this one, but I know it's only going to take me one use because this is only 3 shades, as all of the Bentos are. First, there's a light cream shade, which for me would just be an eyeshadow primer setting shade, and then there's the metallic is next, and it's kind of like a mid-tone, and then you have like a medium deep warm matte shade. So this is what the palette looks like swatched out. I think it'll be a really pretty simple look. I'm planning on bringing this with me when I go out of town in October. I'll be in a place where like you really don't need to wear makeup, so like 90% of my trip is going to be spent there, but I'll probably bring this just in case one day I feel like doing makeup. It'll be something really easy to do, and really quick. I have my Dose of Colors Sassy Siennas palette. I really wanted to make sure I got all of my oranges into this project before October was over, because I feel like for me this is like the last month where I can really wear oranges without it clashing with anything that I'll be wearing. This is what Sassy Siennas looks like, and just like with the I think it's called Making Mauves palette. Okay, no, it's the Marvelous Mauves from Dose of Colors. Anyway, just like with the Marvelous Mauves, you have like 5 different tones of like oranges. So some of them are bright oranges, some are like very warm, some are deep, bright. So yeah, I think this is probably just going to be like another companion palette. I don't really see myself making full looks with just this palette, but either way, I'm really excited, and I'll probably pair it with either of the other 2 palettes that I have in for this October rotation, one of which is the ColourPop Lucky Penny. This is what this palette looks like. I have hit pan in the shade Hit It Big. This was in a project before. It took forever to hit pan. If you've ever hit pan in a ColourPop matte, you will know just how long it took. But I haven't used much of the rest of the palette. I think the only other shades that I've used in this palette are, I think I only use these other two mattes right here, and the rest of the palette I believe is untouched, so I really need to use this. I'm really excited to use it. It seems like really beautiful autumnal tones, especially for being my favorite color, which is orange. And then the last palette that I have for October is my Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. I figured this would be a really good palette for October because, again, kind of just like the Lucky Penny, it has both oranges, which is great for October because there's lots of oranges going on in October, but also it has like those other autumnal shades like the grungy greens and the like deep shades. It has all the different browns. So that's the reason why I only have 4 palettes in for October, because this has, I think, 28 shades. So this is my largest palette as far as how many shades it has. So I'm going to have my work cut out for me, but I'm really excited. I definitely have a lot of oranges in this month, which I feel like I've been saying that for a while now, probably the last 4 or 5 months, but that's okay because I have an orange blush in a project that I'm really trying to get my use on, and I have orange and red lip products that I need to get my use on as well. So and like it's my favorite color, so it's never really a chore to wear. But the jets keep flying by. They must have something going on right now, so I'm gonna end this video. It is very loud, sorry for the noise, but again, let me know what you think of my new setup. Give me any tips or pointers, but other than that, I'll just have to see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye.